Well, Sean, welcome to the podcast. Thanks very much for taking the time to jump on with me.
Pleasure, Chris. Delighted to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, we'll kick it off nice and simple. If you can give us a bit of a backstory on where you are now, but where you started and how that sort of journey progressed to where you are sitting in just north of Cleveland at the moment.
Yeah, well, I've been at Spire Academy since last October. I got a phone call out of the blue, which is one of the great things about our game, to set up a new academy. It's basically like an IMG, where it's a residential soccer academy where the student athletes come to learn, be educated both in the classroom and on the football pitch. And basically my mandate was to try and find 20 players before September from around the world and America. So I'll probably come to that towards the end, but that's what I'm doing here at the moment. So that's been my sort of remit and mandate for the past 8 months.
That sounds pretty cool. That sounds like a pretty cool role.
Yeah, great job. Yeah, sometimes you get lucky.
And well, we can start there. So how like that? So I'm interested to know with these things how they come about. And from the guys I've spoke to already, it's been like that. It's been a phone call or someone they knew, or just through sort of a bit of a network of footballers that these opportunities come up.
Yeah, and that's exactly what happened. So I'd been in Bangladesh for 3.5 years prior to being offered this role, and they actually offered me another 2-year deal to stay at the club that I was at. But there had been a few things that had gone on at the club, a few people that weren't on board with the direction that I wanted to go. And, as you would know, if everybody's not on the same page at a football club, you're never going to go anywhere. And so I gave them a few months to put a few things in place that I'd asked them to do, and then I would have signed that 2-year deal. And it didn't happen. So in the end, I resigned and I went back to Australia, and I started working down at the Gold Coast Knights with Scotty McDonald and Pat Hedges. And I literally 2 months later got a phone call from a guy who you would know called Troy Bingham, who I'd worked with at Gold Coast United, who I'd sort of known for 10 or 15 years, who was working over here. And he was consulting to Spire, and they were looking for a new, director of soccer and head coach. And he basically said, I know the guy that you need to speak to. And, he's been involved with startups, Gold Coast United, and startups in business. And they're very similar skill sets that you require. And one of those is a lot of resilience. And I literally had an interview over Skype, and the contract landed in my email 3 days later. And I said to my wife, I've just been offered a job the other side of the world. I can't take this without actually flying over there, seeing them and eyeballing these people and making sure it's all real. So I literally, jumped on a plane, met everybody, and sort of 3 days later shook hands, and the deal was done, like literally in the space of probably 10 days.
I've found that as well, actually, just going off these last couple of conversations, is these things tend to move very quickly. From the moment that someone reaches out. And do you think, was it more of the recommendation from Troy that got you quite far, and then like that, you just had to meet each other, see each other face to face, just understand and make sure you're on the same page, and it was pretty much done? Yeah,
I think so. I think like any of those things, if you've got a recommendation from somebody that these people trust, that gets you through the door. Obviously the interview process, you've got to sound like you know what you're doing, and your experience has got to sort of speak for itself. And you've got to sort of buy into their vision. You've got to, obviously sell the fact that you're prepared to do the work to get what they want. But yeah, again, I think nearly every one of my jobs has been a tap on the shoulder. And whether that's been in my corporate gigs, before coaching, or definitely in my coaching.
Yeah. Yeah. Just building that network of people. Yeah. Yeah. It seems to be so important. And I find it now as well, like once you're sort of in it and you get to know a few people, and then it's quite easy to build that network quite quickly as well.
Yeah. And I think, and again, you would know this, but particularly in our game, there's a lot of people that talk a good game, but there's not a lot of substance to it. And I'm not saying that as a general rule, but there are a lot of people around the world that, flatter to deceive. And I think that, if you've got some runs on the board and people trust you, I think that goes a long way.
Yeah, no, 100%. And what was the most difficult part of sort of taking that deal and getting across there quite quickly? And obviously, as you said before, like mentioning to the wife, all right, now we're off to America. How
Yeah.
do those conversations go?
Well, because I've been in Bangladesh for 3.5 years, it was quite easy. She didn't want to live in Bangladesh, so America was a bit more appealing. But again, we had a business on the Gold Coast, so my wife couldn't just up and leave. So there was a whole sort of strategy and plan around how we were going to manage that. So probably the most difficult thing for me was that there was no coaching involved. There was no team here to coach. So when I arrived, it was really a recruitment process. Basically, you got 9 months to find 20 players from around the world. So I spent probably 9 months traveling. And there was one sort of, godsend or silver lining was the fact that when the club had the academy had bought a club in Cleveland for a good price and had rebadged it Spire FC. And I basically said, look, if I can't coach down at the club, I don't know if I can do the 9 months without doing any coaching. So they allowed me to do that. And I was blessed because I walked into a team with, I had 4 All-Americans. It was an under-19 team, under-18 team, some really talented kids. 4 All-Americans, 13 of my squad went to Division 1 colleges. I would have taken 4 or 5 of these kids. If I was at a pro club, I'd have taken 4 or 5 of them in a heartbeat. Fantastic ability, brilliant attitude, all the things you'd want in a young sort of professional footballer. But it's really interesting over here. They're not interested, a lot of them. 4 or 5 of our players have been offered deals at the MLS and knocked it back because they wanted to go to college.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not like, coming out of the UK where, you'd cut someone's hand off to get a contract as a young pro. These kids are saying, no, I want to go to college. I want to do my 4 years and get a degree, and if it works out after that I get a pro gig, then I'll do it. But it's certainly not top of their priority list. But so the most difficult thing for me was at the start was I thought I'm not going to be able to coach here for 9 months, and that's the bit that I love the most.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that, because even here, as you would know, like when kids are that 17, 18, if you get an A-League contract offer, you'd take it.
Yeah,
instantly.
Yeah, and I think one of the things is that a lot of the kids. So it's again, the soccer over here is pay to play, very similar to Australia, and there's a lot of wealthy parents, and I think the wealthier the parents, the more the education is important, and I think the more that they're sort of steered down the path of college, and the whole networking that brings, because I think everyone knows that making a career and a living out of professional football is a tough gig. I think it's less than 0.001% will earn any money out of the game, at any level. So I think they recognise that. And I just think, again, historically and traditionally, that whole college pathway for US kids is sort of has always been the dream, really.
Yeah, it does, isn't it? I mean, you've seen it forever on movies, in real life, whatever it is. It's that American college dream is just that. People want to go and experience it. I think personally, I wish I'd been able to do it as well, because it would be an awesome opportunity. But it's interesting to think that they would give up. But I see what they sort of coming from is, potentially a short-term contract in the MLS that might not then work out, or if it's a generational thing of going to college over there, isn't it?
Correct. Yeah, exactly right. So. But for me, I was blessed that we actually owned the club, and it allowed me to coach, because I would not have stayed, for the 9 months. I would have left after 3 months. I just, sitting in an office wasn't what I wanted to do. Getting on planes, talking to parents, it's fine as part of the job, but it certainly wasn't the prime mover for me moving.
And the sort of getting together and the rebuild or the recruitment of the squad, that was worldwide. So you were flying sort of here, there, and everywhere. And how were you coming across those players that potentially you'd identify first and then go and see them?
Yeah, good question, because there wasn't a massive marketing spend. So we've got a basketball academy for men and women here. We've got athletics academy here. We've got a swimming academy, wrestling, and the new sports in fact, we've got esports and drone racing, but we've got the newest of the new sports for soccer and lacrosse. So we've obviously got a website, but a lot of it, and we had probably out of the 20 guys that have been recruited to date, probably 5 or 6 come off the website. 3 or 4 Australians are coming over from Melbourne, and one of those was somebody I'd known for 30 years. And the dad rang me and said, my son's at a loose end. I think he needs a challenge. And then two of his mates also came with him. So they came over for 10 days and they had a look at the place and spent some time, training and enjoying the facility. And then they all decided they were going to come. I've had about half, or in fact, all of the Americans, I think, have basically come in for one-on-one sessions, toured the facility, and like what they hear and see, and they've all signed up. So it's been sort of a variety of different ways, but there's no sort of one particular way. And we've got a lot of international agents or IRs, international recruiters, and some of them are really good, and some of them, again, flatter to deceive. They're like agents when you're at a pro club. They tell you one thing and they promise you the world and nothing happens. So, so we've had to deal with, that's been a frustration, to be honest, a lot, with a lot of them. We'll get you this and we'll get you that. So you sign them to a deal and a contract. Nothing happens and they've got exclusivity for a region. And then you're handcuffed for 6 months while they do nothing for you. So, but we've probably, and again, because it's you've got to pay, and it's a significant sum to come here. That normally it's over 60 grand US to come here to learn, come to school, eat, sleep. It's a boarding school. We had a sort of an inaugural fee that was 48,500 US, and obviously I've got some scholarship money that I can give to certain people. But it's a significant sacrifice and investment from a lot of parents to send their kids here to, and most of them, it's to get a good scholarship at a college, and some of them want to push on to a pro league, and I've got a couple that are probably good enough to push on to be pros. So it's interesting.
Yeah, that is a big sum. Is that a yearly sum? That roughly 60,000?
Yeah.
So per year, which is obviously for guys coming from Australia, is about 100,000, give or take.
Yeah, correct. And it is a lot, and it sounds like a lot, and it is a lot. But IMG, who are our major competition, they're charging closer to 100,000 US for a year, and I think they just sold their business 3 months ago to a Chinese consortium for 1.3 billion. So they obviously see the opportunity, in sports academies.
Well, we've seen it. I mean, you'd been a bit closer, not obviously in there, but we've seen it in like Qatar and Dubai with the academies they're building, in a similar sort of situation where it's live in and they're bringing the locals in, and obviously some internationals as well to raise the standard, international coaches to raise the standard of coaching as well. So it is a big business, but also a big opportunity, I suppose, if your family has the money, and it is a lot of money, but it's a fantastic opportunity for people to take up.
Yeah, and look, and when you walk around this place, the first word that comes out of your mouth is wow. You could literally hold the Olympic Games here. It's got an indoor athletic track, an outdoor athletic track. It's got a 20,000 seat stadium. It's got 2 indoor soccer pitches. They're building 4 more soccer pitches. It's got a high performance gym, like second to none. It's got all the testing equipment that you'd find in a Premier League club in the UK. There's nothing that these guys want for.
It's amazing, isn't it? Like when you think of probably the places you have been, whether it's Australia and Bangladesh, you just know that America does everything like on big scales, don't they?
Yeah, and just little things like, so we've just come back from the Nationals. I had 2 of our club sides were at the Nationals in Orlando, so they made the top 16 clubs in the country, and there was a big tournament 2 weeks ago. And we went down to Disneyland, so ESPN Wide World of Sports, and there's 20-odd pitches, grass, that are absolutely immaculate, to the point where you have to touch it, because it looks that good. You think it's AstroTurf. It is absolutely immaculate. And you've got the best kids in America down there playing games. There's a lot of talented kids over here, and boys and girls. So as you say, everything's bigger and better, but they do it well for sure. Yeah,
no, it does. And well, touching on how good you've got it there, I'd be really interested to see what your experience was like in Bangladesh, because you just sounds like it's going to be a difficult, great experience, but probably a difficult situation to walk into.
Yeah, look, I loved it. And again, I'll give you a sort of a preview on how it all worked out. So when I was doing all my licenses, there was a guy called Paul Smalley. I was doing my B license up in Brisbane. And this English guy, was there, and as an observer, as part of the the crew that facilitate the license. and he sort of was introduced at the start, didn't say too much to anybody, and I thought I'd introduce myself to him the second day at morning tea, and it just happened that he was from Nottingham, and he knew two of my best mates that I'd known for 30 years, like literally, how small's the world sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then he must have rung them to find out whether I was telling the truth, and found out that obviously that I was, and I did know these guys, and we sort of became mates, and he sort of mentored me through my B licence, mentored me through my A licence, and then in between times he got the technical director's job in Bangladesh, and he rang me a couple of times and offered me a couple of jobs but there were 2-year stints, and I didn't want to go to Bangladesh for 2 years. I just joined Gold Coast Knights, and Bangladesh certainly wasn't on my bucket list of places to go. But then he rang me again with a job for one of the pro clubs over there, a club called Mohammedan Sporting Club, that was probably, I think, was the oldest club in Bangladesh, the biggest support in Bangladesh. They'd sacked the coach. There was 3 months to go in the season. They were second from bottom in the league. They'd never been relegated from the top league, and the club had come to him to say, "Do you know anybody that could help us?" So he rang me and said, "Look, this job's going. It's only 3 months. You got nothing to lose." And that was a more difficult conversation with the wife. By the way, I'm just heading off for 3 months to Bangladesh. I've got no idea where it is, what it's like. Only the fact that I thought it was steeped in poverty. But I thought I've got nothing to lose. So I went, and it was an absolute sensory overload from the minute you step off the plane at Dhaka Airport. Now you've got a country with 145 million people that's probably just a bit bigger than Victoria. There's 50 million people in Dhaka, so imagine 50 million people in Melbourne. It's absolutely mobbed. You travel 8Ks and it might take you 2 hours. And there's no rules on the road. So literally traveling from the airport down to the hotel where they put me up, I could have turned around 3 or 4 times and get me out of here. It was terrifying. So I think the road rules are determined by how big the vehicle you're driving is. So
they're in charge, yeah.
Yeah. So, and then, I had no idea how big the club was until, you go to the first game and you've got a raft of press there, 30 deep, asking you questions, leading questions about how bad the team is and who the hell are you coming from Australia? You got no credentials and no qualifications, in their eyes. And to be honest, for the first couple of days, I'm like, what the hell have I done? What am I doing here? I'm not sure that I'm good enough to be here. And it doesn't take long once you play a couple of games and you see what you're up against and you hear from the other players some of the stuff that goes on at the other clubs, you soon find out that you are good enough and you're probably better than a lot of the coaches that are there. And that's probably one of the biggest lessons that I've learned, is that you got to back yourself in. And it doesn't matter, at what level, what it is, you've got to believe in yourself. And if you don't, then no one else will. And, I had 3.5 fantastic years there at that club. And as I said, I would have stayed for another 2 years. But there was a couple of factions in there, and I had a couple of the wrong faction sort of close to it. The team that I was working with, and it was just never going to work. And I was doing my pro license when I was over there, and one of the things that all the presenters said was, if you're in a toxic environment at a club and you can't change it, get out. And that sort of really resonated with me, and I thought it's just not worth doing it. I'm away from home. I think I've taken them as far as I can based on the situation that I'm in. And if I can't get it changed, then I'll leave, which is what happened. But, when I got to Mohammedan, I had the Bangladesh top goal scorer ever playing for me. He basically hadn't played for the whole season because he didn't like the coach, and they'd had 3 coaches before I got there. Oh, wow. He ran the changing room. He almost ran the club. So, I had to get him on side fairly quickly. And, I was fortunate enough to be able to do that. I did a couple of the fitness tests. Now, I was probably 55 and I was doing some of the fitness work with them because they were miles away from where they needed to be. And I was, he was a sort of ex-national team player. 32 years old, and I was almost beating him in the running as a 55-year-old sort of thing. So that's the sort of level he had to deal with. So we had to get it quickly from where it was to a point where they could actually play 90 minutes and press, which is the way that I like to play. So, so that was a challenge. Again, it's a 99.9% Muslim country, right? So they pray 5 times a day. And when the call for prayer goes off, it doesn't matter what you're doing, they go. So literally in the middle of a team talk, you're literally there talking to yourself. If it goes off in a game, they pray by the side of the dugout. The players continue to play, but the rest of your staff are playing, particularly during Ramadan and when they break their fast and all that sort of. So all of those cultural differences that you've never been exposed to, you've got to sort of learn to navigate around those without obviously upsetting the apple cart, because you're living in their country, and working within their culture.
I was going to say, you'd have to show obviously your respect, and it's not that you don't respect it or you don't understand. It's just, as you say, you've never been exposed to it, and there's nothing you can do to control it. So that would be a difficult thing to try and manage around, obviously, with trying to get team talks, coach the team, have games going on, and like that. Just an amazing experience, though.
Yeah, and the thing, I'll just ask questions. As you said, you just got to be respectful. Like, what can we do to work around this? What does your religion allow you to do? Is it, if you miss the call for prayer, are you able to go and do it at another time afterwards, but as long as you make it up? And so once I sort of came to understand the things that were allowed to do, that allowed them to sort of stick to the rules of the Quran and their religion, we struck a happy medium where I got what I needed and they got what they needed. So but it was a real challenge, because at the start I was too scared to ask anything. They just went and that was it, and that's what they'd always done. And as I went into the second year, so this isn't working for me, lads. How can we work together to make this better? But there was so many, like I can remember my first away trip, Chris, right? So I'd literally would have been there for 2 weeks, and the track was our first away trip. We got a coach out of Dhaka, we got a ferry across a river, and then we got another coach to the game. And there was only one ferry that we could get on, and if we missed it, we'd missed the game. So we were driving out of Dhaka, and the traffic was carnage. And the team manager at the time was a heavy hitter, right? He had a lot of politicians in his phone book, a lot of friends who held in high regard. Anyway, basically he told the traffic driver to drive over the medium strip and drive into the oncoming traffic, right? So we drove for 2 hours into the oncoming traffic, 30, 40 miles an hour, trucks, buses, rickshaws, pedestrians coming the other way. We got stopped, I reckon, 4 times by the police. He got off, basically said to them, if you want me to ring the Prime Minister, I'll do it. And in the end, we ended up getting police escorts to allow us to get to the ferry on time on the opposite side of the road into oncoming traffic. I'm like, what have I got myself into? It was complete madness.
And that's 2 weeks in, so you would have been thinking, what have I got myself into?
Yeah, 2 weeks in. So, so I've got a pack of baying reporters who want blood, because it's the biggest club in the country and it's underperforming. I've got players who are miles away from being anywhere near fit. I've got 2 of my 4 foreign players aren't good enough, right? And they were very passive aggressive. Yes sir, no sir, 3 bags full sir. Then go and do what they want. And then I've got the whole cultural thing to deal with, and then this whole driving into oncoming traffic, thinking my life's going to end at any second. So it was it was exciting, and we managed to get the team midway through up the table before the end of the season, and it all worked out. But just a fantastic experience.
And with those say those foreigners that weren't performing, is that something that you have to manage, say, from a contract point of view? So if you decided after your 3 months you're going to stay there a bit longer, how do you go ahead and say, do you contact the club or the owner not to get rid of them, but do you know what I mean? You say, well, I need to get better players in, and how do those conversations go?
Yeah, great question. And I was fortunate that over there, the foreign players, well, at that stage, signed contracts for half the season. So they run like a League One and a League Two. So these contracts had run out. So basically, I went in, and after a week, I just said to the powers that be, you need to get rid of these two players. They're bad news. Get rid of them. And I knew a friend of mine I knew who lived in Vietnam, but was looking after a good African players in Vietnam. I said, you need to find me a couple of players that you trust that can come over at this level and do a job for me. And he found me two players, and they were, one was a striker, one was a centre half, and they made a massive difference. The striker, scored goals for fun. He's still scoring goals for fun over there. And the centre half was this 6'5" guy from Ghana that chewed people up and spat them out, and sort of the spine of the team was good, and they had great attitudes, and they were glad for the opportunity, and they did all the right things. So again, that's one of the key things that I learned. If people aren't on board, get rid of them as soon as you can.
And again, just touching on the guy that you've sort of reached out to there, that again probably comes back to your network and your football network of saying, I need someone that you trust, and you obviously have enough respect for what they do to know when they come in that you can rely on them.
Exactly right. And look, he was a guy that was on my A license, who I'd never met before then, hit it off. He rang up and said, when he found out that I got the job, can I come over and just see what you're doing? He came over. I ended up getting him involved, and he ended up being my assistant coach for the time that I was there. And again, I trusted his judgment. I trusted him implicitly. And when you're in a foreign land with a lot of people you don't know, and you're not sure of who you should trust, having someone alongside you can trust is a key component to any chance of or likelihood of being successful.
And with the as you said, like you had the guy Paul there as the technical director. Did you get control? Because you hear a lot through Asia that the club owners might make substitutions, you know what I mean, or pull people off and things like that. But did it take time to get control of bringing in, say, your own staff and your own players?
No, I dug my heels in early doors, because the bottom line, I was there for 3 months, so I didn't care.
Yeah.
Right, so I just they tried subtly. Coach, what do you think? I think I'm the coach, you're the team manager. I'll make the decisions. You've employed me to do the job. If I don't do it, you can sack me. Right? If I'm not successful, get rid of me. But don't get me in here and expect me to do what you want to do. Because in the past, I think they've been allowed to do that because the coaches had let them. And as soon as you dig the heels in, they backed off, and we started to get results. So they left you in peace. So I didn't have that. In fact, I can honestly tell you that I never had that once. I had a couple of times my team manager, who was an ex-national team player for Bangladesh and a really good guy, used to come and say, what do you think? But never, you should do this and you should do that. Never once. And if they'd done, they knew that I would have left.
It's a good it's a good lesson there, I suppose, for other foreigners, because like that, it can be an intimidating place going in there. You might not speak the language, and as you say, with all the cultural differences you have to deal with, and the press and everything else, you could easily, if you don't back yourself, just give in to what they do and just be their puppet. But I suppose that's, as you say, you're there because they've hired you to do the job, so back off and let me do the job.
And like, I think once they see that you get results, once they see your sessions and they know they know that you know what you're doing. I tried to instill some discipline and some structure. They just sort of let you go. And I always tried to include them, let them know what I was doing. It wasn't like, I'm the big I am. This is what I'm doing. And I tried to be as inclusive as I could, pick their brains. But ultimately, I did what I wanted to do, but I always tried to get them on board. And obviously they had far more insight into, some of the issues around resources and pitches, and I'm like, this isn't good enough, and we can't train on this pitch. And they said, well, that's all we've got, coach. So you either bite the bullet and deal with what you've got and make the most of it, or you cause a stink. And I never used to cause a stink. In fact, if it's around players' wages being late, that's probably the only time I would jump up and down and say, you've got to sort these boys out. I knew they tried to give me the best they could. With the limited resources that are over in Bangladesh, but when it came to the players not getting paid or getting paid late, that's when they're the battles that I wanted to go in and win.
And is that for the locals and the foreigners? It was more
the locals. The foreigners generally got paid before the locals because they were deemed better players. And FIFA would get involved, if they were too late. But the locals had very little say, and it was almost like, for them, they were blessed being involved in soccer and being a professional footballer, and they were too scared to go to the federation. So, but I used to, I used to say to the players, if they don't pay you, lads, if you're not paid by Tuesday, we won't train. And I used to say to the club, I can't ask them to train if you're not paying them, so give them the money. And the players knew that I'd go into bat for them. So, what I got from the players in return was the fact that they'd run through brick walls for me, and they'd do, all the things that, because they knew I cared, and they knew I was in their corner, and I knew that I could ask them to do anything. They would. I probably had the worst roster of locals, and they'd agree with this. Sort of the dregs that were left over, but they gave me everything, and we ended up fourth in semi-finals of the Federation Cup, and with a team that really should have been relegated.
Yeah, and as you say, it's a two-way street, isn't it? Like you want the players to do things for you, but when they see you doing things for them, it's easy then to work together and move in the right direction. As you sort of mentioned before, with the upper end, I suppose, or the club owners is like that, managing upwards and keeping them involved. So being a good negotiator and being able to sit in the middle and try and move things along as a group is vitally important.
Yeah, you're spot on, Chris. And look, and I wasn't great, because there's a lot of people involved at the club who were ex-players at the club, very, very wealthy businessmen who are not used to people saying no to them, and having to go in and manage egos, massage egos, listen to people who hadn't coached a team but had played for the national team for 50 games and were legends in the country, having to listen to some of the nonsense. This is what we did in the 70s and 80s, and negotiate with the guys who were piling the money into the players, and having to listen to their say when it was wrong. We're not going to pay the players unless they win the next game. Well, that's not going to work, sir, because they should have been paid last week. And that's not going to motivate them. That's going to demotivate them, and they don't understand. Because they're so used to doing what they want and getting away with what they do, because they're the sort of the wealthy sort of 10% or 20% in Bangladesh.
Yeah, an interesting, very interesting. I suppose you would learn, like yourself, just life lessons and different skill sets being thrown into an experience like that.
Yeah, look, exactly right. And the other thing is that it's very hierarchical over there, and it doesn't, so you've got the boss, the team manager, you've got the senior players, the junior players, the kit boys, the cleaners, and wherever you are on that rung, you sort of tug your forelock to everybody else who's above you. And even getting that changed amongst the playing group was difficult, because the young players who were playing in the first team were too scared to say anything to the senior players. The senior players would ball out the younger players that they made a mistake, but no one would say anything to them if they made a mistake. So I made a real conscious effort to know everybody's name, from the cleaner to the kit boys to the chef, and everybody in between. And I would stop and talk to all of them. I would know what's going on with their family. I would make sure that the players treated everybody around them with respect. And again, that wasn't a normal thing, within the club environments in Bangladesh. It's just not culturally. It's a very hierarchical society, and I didn't like the way that it separated people.
No, interesting. And it's is that stuff that you'd learned? Obviously, it's just your personality, but just stuff that's sort of been ingrained in you from the different coaching experiences you've had over the years.
Yeah, and I think traveling a lot as well, Chris. If you spend some time getting to know people, and you tend to get more back from them. I had a long career, like 20 years, corporate leading sales teams, and the members of your team will work for you if they know that you care. It's how you make them feel, and they'll respond to you. And so it's just something that I've learned, and even from my personal experience, I'll do more for people who make me feel good, who I think generally care for me, than I would for anybody else. So, So I actually hadn't thought about it, but yes, I think that's something I picked up on the way through subconsciously.
No, definitely. And then touching on your own, not so much the football experience, but What challenges did you face being in Bangladesh? Obviously, was your wife at the start still here in Australia? Like around visas, around your own contract negotiations, around sending money home or saving money or getting paid yourself on time. How did all that work? Bank accounts, things like that.
Yeah, so look, my wife never didn't come. She came for 5 days and was happy to leave after three. So yeah, I was paid regularly on time. Everything they said they were going to pay me, they did. It might have been a couple of weeks late at times, but I knew they would always pay me. So it was never an issue for me. So all of that stuff was done, and with a minimum of fuss and a minimum of issues. From my personal experience, it was a lot more difficult for the African players to try and get it back to Africa than it was for me, because the whole banking system's corrupt and fraudulent, and they found it very challenging to get money out of Bangladesh and back into the country, and even to the point where the African players would go back with money and be ripped off by their own families, because they were deemed as the sugar daddies for the family and friends. And so I was a lot more. I probably spent a lot more time looking after their finances than I did after my own, to be honest.
So yours was like, did the club set you up a bank account, and did they pay you in US dollars, or did they just pay you cash?
No, US dollars. So no bank account, but it was all sorted out. So
brown paper bags. I like it.
Yeah, it was an interesting. It wasn't normal like you and I would normally get paid. There's the bank account, because I was only allowed a 6-month visa. There's challenges with types of visas. So I had to renew it every year. So there was different sort of issues that I had to overcome, but it certainly wasn't straightforward.
And the visa situation. So when you initially go there, is that, as you say, so it's a 6-month visa you can get? Is that because you're employed as a coach to get that type of visa?
Yeah, and again, because of the club and the clout that the club had, the real visa that I should have got was waived, and they gave me another visa that still allowed me to come into the country and do the job. Most other people going there to work wouldn't have been able to do what I did with the visa that I had. So, the club, the two big clubs in Dhaka were historically Dhaka Mohammedan, where I was, and Dhaka Rabbani, and they were both each side of the political spectrum. And there's a lot of heavy hitters and powerful people involved with both clubs, and obviously they pulled strings to allow me to do what I was doing.
So they sort of make it happen for you. You just need to sign the bits of paper or whatever it is, but they'll take care of what they need to.
Yeah. So there's a funny story. When my wife came over, you go through Dhaka Airport and it's carnage. It's absolute bedlam, and there's people pulling you from pillar to post. So it was my wife and my youngest daughter came over, and I thought it'd be a great adventure for my youngest daughter to make her understand how lucky she was living in Australia on the Gold Coast. Anyway, I said to my wife, when you land at Dhaka Airport, it's going to be bedlam. And I know this is going to sound like I'm a dick, right? But just when you go to get your visa, just tell them that you're coming to see your husband and he's the coach of Dhaka Mohammedan. And she said, "Oh, get lost. You're winding me up." And I said, I know it sounds like, dirty big bollocks, right? But anyway, the queue was a mile long. One of these gophers came up to her. She was one of the only 2 or 3 ladies in this queue. Said, "What are you doing here?" She said, "I'm coming to see my husband. He's the coach of Dhaka Mohammedan." Pulled her out with my daughter, front of the queue, got stamped, got the visa, walked through customs, got the clearance, straight through, helped with the bags, onto a bag. And she said it was like royalty. And you don't understand, even I didn't understand when I was there, the strength of the support, the depth and the history of the club, and the political persuasion that goes on with the club. She was blown away. I was blown away when she told me the story. I had no idea that she was going to get that sort of treatment, but I knew she'd be looked after. It was mad.
Yeah, it's just because like that in those countries where it's so populated and football's like religion as well to these people, that if you're doing well and you're someone like that, Billy Big Time, the coach of the head coach of the team that
Yeah,
everyone loves, it's
yeah,
like, yeah, anything you need, we'll do it.
yeah. So, so when we played, we would get between 5 and 20,000 people at our games. But if you go back to the 80s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, the local derby, they get 40 or 50,000. The game would kick off at 3 o'clock. The ground would be full by 11. 44,000 people in there, and another 40,000 people outside trying to get in.
Wow.
Yeah, it was mental. So, but now cricket's taken over, and sort of soccer's the sort of football's the sort of second sport over there behind cricket in Bangladesh. Mate, an unbelievably good experience. Even the bad bits were good.
Yeah, because at least you didn't die in driving the wrong way down the motorway.
But I'll tell you, I was over there during COVID, and I thought I was going to die when COVID was on, because you cannot socially distance.
No.
I caught COVID over there. Again, I thought I was bulletproof; it won't happen to me. But I caught it, and I got it bad, and I thought, I'm living in this apartment on my own, and if I died, no one's going to know where I am. I'll be found 2 years later with skeletons, and that was about it. But it was literally, they tell you that you'd have there's going to be a lockdown. You'd have 2 days where there'd be nobody on the streets, and people, if they don't work, they can't eat. So literally, everybody. I'd go to training in the middle of a lockdown in a traffic jam. So, yeah,
I mean, it's funny you can laugh about it now, but I suppose at the time, and being there by yourself, and with all that going on outside of COVID, never mind that. But how did you deal with just the day to day? What did you do away from football to just try and keep, I suppose, switched on and not too worried about what was happening around you?
But one of the great things, the best thing about not having a family there is that you're devoted 24/7 to doing your job. So, I would, any injured players, I'd do 2 sessions. I'd take the injured players in the evening. In another session, they'd be I'd take them for pull sessions, recovery sessions. I'd do spin sessions. I would do everything with them, to the point where, I might be in and out of the club from either the hotel, if I was staying at the hotel, or my apartment 2 or 3 times a day. So I'd get on a motorbike, on an Uber motorbike, to zip in and out of the traffic, and I'd be, we'd have a session at 7 in the morning, and we'd have another session at 2:30 in the afternoon, and then we might have another session at 6 or 7 in the evening. So I'd be in and out, and then you'd have your analysis sessions that I would do with the help of a guy I knew in Australia. And then my assistant coach and I would go and watch other games. So you were literally immersed in the job.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Like that, there's nothing else to worry about, so you can just be at football all day doing different things. Yeah.
And look, it was great. And and then because we went to bed early, so because we were up early, and that was one of the other things when I first arrived. They'd have one training session a day at 2 in the afternoon, so all the players would be, and the players stay in their own sort of hostel hotel thing, but they'd all be on their phones till 2, 3 in the morning, because they knew they didn't have to get up to train. So that was one of the things that changed first. Was, okay, we're going to train twice a day, and the first session is going to be early, out of the heat of the day. And that helped change their habits. Had to change the whole diet as well. I mean, they were eating curry 3 times a day: curry for breakfast, curry for lunch, curry for dinner. Wondered why they had pot bellies and couldn't run. But again, you got to do that gradually. They wouldn't eat on a diet like you and I would know, like an athlete's diet. So you sort of had to introduce things gradually. So again, that you respected their culture and their diet and what they enjoyed, but try to get them to a better place where they could actually, last games and do and be sort of decent during training.
And how did you find that the nutrition side of it when you first got there as well?
Look, I was staying in a hotel for a long time for the first 3 months, so I could eat whatever I wanted. Then I moved to my own apartment, and I sort of cooked, a little bit myself. So I muddled through, Chris. Wasn't ideal, but I lived a lot. I lived a lot on fruit. Yogurt, cereal in the morning, fruit in the afternoon, and I try and cook myself something in the evenings.
Yeah, so you got by with just the basics.
Yeah, and obviously there's no alcohol, so you don't drink. So 5 months, 6 months at a time with no drink. I'd regularly use between 5 and 8 kilos when I was in Bangladesh. I'd come back,
Yeah.
at my playing weight.
And
So
is it
that was what.
somewhere? It sounds amazing. It sounds obviously difficult, but an amazing experience. Is it something you'd recommend if someone got an offer to go
Yeah,
to Bangladesh to play, say
yeah,
from Australia, from America, wherever they may be? Is it something you'd recommend them to do, maybe on a short-term deal to see how it went?
yeah. So definitely, depending which club.
Yeah.
I took an Australian guy, Aaron Reardon, who's at the Gold Coast Knights now, was at Brisbane Roar. He came
Mm.
over with me for a season. Did really well, and came back with some money in the bank.
Mm.
And a great life experience. So 100% I would, but I'd do a lot of homework on where I'm going, which club, and
Mm.
am I going to get paid on time?
Yeah, yeah, it's a big challenge, and again, that would come back to, we've said it a couple of times already, but your football network is reaching out to someone that you trust, that
Yeah,
knows the landscape, that can point you in the right direction.
yeah, 100%. You got it.
And do you think that's through, if you are in Australia, you think that's through agents, or is that just through people like trying to stay? The odd agent might have a bit of experience there, but probably someone like yourself, or someone like Paul who'd been there, you'd rather speak to those people than an
I think
agent
so.
themselves.
I
Yeah.
think so because the agents have got a vested interest, and even the good ones have got a vested interest. And I've got some really good mates who are agents who I would trust implicitly.
Mm.
Um, but again, they've got a vested interest, so there's always a slant on any conversation that you have with
Mm.
most of them. That's what I've found. And again, I would never sign a player unless I'd seen them. Certainly in Bangladesh, I got 100 phone calls a day or emails. Sign this player, sign that player. He's this, that, and the other. And I never signed one player that either I hadn't seen
Mm.
or my assistant coach didn't know or hadn't seen.
Yeah, yeah, just to make sure that you know what you're getting.
Yeah. So there were situations where clubs had signed African players in Bangladesh, and the player that actually turned up wasn't that player; it was his brother, and looked
Yeah,
nothing like him. And it was a con.
yeah, the Wild
So
West, the Wild
yeah, that's
West.
exactly what it was like. So I just didn't want to get into any of that stuff. And again, culturally, I wanted to make sure that I knew the person, that they would fit in what we were
Mm.
trying to do, that would take us forward rather than rely on somebody, as I said, an agent with a vested interest.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And just a quick question then on back to where you are now, and say the visa situation going to America. How does that work? Like, say not just for yourself, but say the three kids that come from Melbourne. Is it easy enough for them to get a visa? Is it quite a long and drawn out process, or did you need to prove like that we're going to school there so we can get a visa that way?
Yeah, so for the three guys, we help them get student visas. So for the three kids coming from Melbourne, they're all fine. A lot more difficult for myself. So I basically, for this first period, I've been a foreign contractor. So I've been
Yeah.
um, I've been in and out of the country because I've been traveling so much recruiting. I've not
Mm.
been living here. My home is still Australia. But now I'm literally going through. I'm in the process of getting my e-visa, which will allow me to stay and work, and my wife can also stay and work. So that's in the process, and that'll happen, I think, in the next 3 or 4 weeks.
And is that something that Spire help you with, or do you have
Yeah,
an immigration agent, or they
yeah,
put you in
yeah,
touch with them?
yeah. No, they've done all of that stuff. They've been brilliant. To be fair, they they've looked after me, better than I would have imagined. But having said that, I've done the job that they asked me to do. So
Yeah.
Um, I think you get that quid pro quo when you put a shift in. And again, my wife hasn't been here, so I've thrown myself into the job, and they've seen that. So I think they're
Mm.
quite happy to make an investment in me because they've seen the investment I put into the company.
And how long are you there now? Do you have how long's your deal that you're currently on?
It's like a rolling 1 year deal, which suits me.
Yeah.
It's I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying all of it. It's a new adventure. Um, Different culture again. The Americans are a different breed to the Aussies,
Mm.
who are a different breed to the Bangladeshis, who are a different breed to the English. So,
Yeah.
it's again just trying to adapt and make sure that, you try and work in with with the values that they've got, but as long as they're akin to the values that you hold.
I'm guessing your time in Bangladesh, and with it being like that, such a Muslim country with all their prayers and Ramadans, that moving to America, but bringing some of that, trying to build that culture around that, no doubt would have helped you a lot, especially with the language and trying to get people on the same page with the facilities you have available as well.
Yeah, exactly right. So, you think that the Americans would be so far ahead where it comes to culture and core values, and I think obviously they are ahead of a lot of countries, but there's still massive areas for improvement. Even in the environment that I'm in at the moment, in the club environments that I've seen when I've travelled around the country. So there's still great opportunities where you can go in and make a difference, which is what I've really enjoyed doing.
What do you think's lacking? Just when you say that, what do you think that you sort of see, or is it a common thing that you see that something glaring is missing?
Well, I think where I am, you've got different sports and there's different nationalities and different races and creeds playing different sports, and they come from different backgrounds, and what they think is important and what they think is culturally acceptable wouldn't be for me in my team environment. Yeah. So, what the basketballers think is acceptable wouldn't be acceptable to me in a soccer program. And that's just sort of one example. They just come from different backgrounds, different ethnicities, different understandings of what they're used to as a norm. And for me, that wouldn't be an acceptable thing. So, they're the challenges that the Spire as a whole are addressing. And the great thing for me is I've got a new program, so I can just lay the law down from the start. So that's a great thing for me. So,
and how have the Aussies that are over there, how have they found it and settled in?
Well, they all come back over in August. They came for 2 weeks and they had an absolute blast. They were again blown away. It was like they were just wow moments for the whole sort of 10 days they were there. They all came with their mothers. They had a great time as well. We're in the heart of the Ohio winery country, so everyone had a good time outside. Well, the mothers certainly had a good time outside of what we were doing. But I'll tell you what, the Americans are: friendly, warm, welcoming, and any foreigner, open arms. As long as you're friendly and reasonable and respectful, they're really warm and welcoming people. Certainly in the Midwest where I am. And
they love Australians as well, don't they? The Americans.
Yeah, they do, absolutely. Yeah, can you say that again, Sick? I love your accent, and I'm not even an Australian, but yeah. So really enjoying it, Chris. Really am. A great opportunity to build something and another challenge.
Yeah, no, fantastic. Look, no doubt, and I've had all these conversations I'm having with people. We could probably chat for hours and hours, but I am conscious of time, not to drag it on too long. But thank you very much, Sean, for your time, mate. That was really, really interesting, and as I thought it would be, especially around the Bangladesh part, and like that, where you are now, because I've seen it online. It looks incredible, and hopefully one day I'll get over there to have a look at it.
Mate, you're more than welcome any time, and when I get back, I'll have a beer with you.
Yeah, no, definitely, mate. Definitely. Thank you.
Top man. Cheers. Thanks, Chris. See you, buddy. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.